Hello, and welcome back to the Fifth Observatory. I know, we're back. I am still Jed. Alas, I am no longer Captain Jed. I have shed my uniform because it is summer, and summer does not agree with faintly thick gabardine uniform cosplay stuff.
I don't know. On this camera, that dressing gown looks quite thick and warm. Is it a dressing gown?
Yeah,
or is it just
it's an Udi, and
Udi.
It may be thick and warm, but I'm wearing nothing underneath it, and it's a lot bloody area.
I shall not peek. But yes, you are Jed, and I am Tresh.
Still wearing your natty cool hat.
Yeah, my awesome hat of awesomeness.
Awesome hat of awesomeness, definitely. So so this is the second of our What Would We Do episodes. Probably not how to reboot, because I don't think it's necessary to reboot Doctor Who. The handy thing about Doctor Who is it seems to self-reboot every time they get a new camera in.
That's true. Although it makes for a nice clickbaity title for YouTube, though, so, you know.
Oh, God, clickbait. Oh, God, save us.
But yeah, no, that is one of the great things about Doctor Who, is it can be continuous and completely different. You know, it's like you can just do exactly the same, but you can do something completely different, and it doesn't necessitate a reboot.
Oh, in case you weren't aware from like the title and the clickbaity thing, we're talking about Doctor Who and what would we do if we were in charge of Doctor Who. And it should be pointed out, this isn't exactly our first rodeo with Doctor Who, but we were talking about this earlier. Basically, the thing is, when we did Doctor Who from two very important points. One, we did Doctor Who from the perspective of being fans, for whom, as much as it would be nice to have 1 billion people watching us, the only people that we really had to please were ourselves. And two, when we did Doctor Who, it was with a budget of fucking diddly squit, and with a cast of diddly squit plus whoever we could rope in to say a couple of lines on camera. So it's a bit.
Should clarify, actually, for anybody who's just clicked on and never seen any of our previous videos, we did a Doctor Who fan film series at one point, which, as Jed has just explained there, we had zero budget for, and also, zero resources, including human resources of actors and so on. So it was literally every single friend we had who had, the slightest inkling of an interest of wanting to be, something creative. There might have been painters. It's like, you're a creative person, you'll do as an actor. And it was like that kind of thing. So anybody, get in there, act. So, yeah, but this is very different from the fan film series. This is, what would we do if BBC actually gave us the control?
Yeah, and it's a fun one. It's a fun one. Because, Doctor Who is interesting because, unlike Star Trek, which has never really been in the hands of fan writers, Doctor Who has been in the hands of writers who used to be fans like us. Basically since its return in 2005, like Russell T Davies was a fan. Stephen Moffat was a fan, rather famously. Chris Chibnall was a fan, made famous by him being on BBC, whatever, and bitching out the writers. Bitching out the writers in front of the writers, which, if you put Chris Chibnall in front of me, maybe I would do the same to him. But, I doubt he would understand the irony. But anyway, no. So... so there is more precedent for people like us getting to be the people in charge of Doctor Who. It's obviously never going to happen for us, but the point is, when we talk about shit we would do, it's less out there in a way because we are approaching it from a perspective that's actually been shared by people who've written it before. That of having watched it when we were young, and indeed now, and having opinions on it and shit, and not I'm Alex Kurtzman and I'm making this because they're paying me to. So. Yeah. So, I mean, what's interesting about it is the core concept is so malleable that you could probably do just about anything. I mean, in terms of just the storytelling of Doctor Who, really, it's episodic storytelling where they go to different worlds every single episode and do stuff. Okay, cool, doing stuff. That's cool. That's really important and stuff. That's not really something that you can fuck up unless you're really trying hard, I mean, so I have ideas for big world-shattering concepts that I want to introduce to the show, but in terms of the way that it's run day to day, the way that the series go episode by episode, I don't think there's all that much that can go wrong with, person in a box takes humans for wild adventures in time and space. I think I don't want to. I think the one caveat that I would probably have is there is a lot that can go wrong if you're getting people in who haven't written sci-fi before. And I don't, the thing is, you and I haven't talked much about the recent series of Doctor Who, like 11 and 12, but I feel like some of the people that they've brought in to write that clearly aren't sci-fi writers, and I feel like that's obvious from the way that they're being written and the way that the episodes turn out. So I definitely make a point of either you get somebody in who knows science fiction, enough to come in and write the damn thing as science fiction because it's science fiction, right? Or you get somebody in who has a really great concept, even if they're not a science fiction writer, but then you police the science fiction side of it and the science fiction world building side of it so that it's not complete, cobblers, if that makes sense.
That's a complaint I have about just a lot of sci-fi and TV at the moment is the writers, the producers, everybody involved, none of them seem to actually be interested in science fiction. They are just like jobbing writers, jobbing directors. The special effects guys, they're probably a bit interested in it, but they're not the ones making the decisions. And unfortunately, the producers are like money men, and they're not interested in actual science fiction or storytelling. It's more about, this is polling good in the demographics, so make sure you shove lots of this in. So I agree with that. It needs to be kept to its sci-fi core, or as I like to think of it, sort of like it's often sort of like horror, but it's sort of it's horror sci-fi disguised as sci-fi kind of thing. It's like we'll do a vampire episode, but it'll turn out to be an alien kind of thing. It's that kind of it's a horror episode, but the monster turns out to be something based in science fiction as opposed to just a supernatural being.
Well, this is it. It's horror sci-fantasy. That's the way that I look at it. I mean, like there are two big examples. Like as well, Doctor Who is imaginative, like super imaginative, and like the best Doctor Who is where it's absolutely bloody wacky out there. Like there are two episodes especially of series 11 that just I look at them and I go, what the fuck were you thinking? And they're controversial choices. So one of them is Kablam, which is the less controversial choice, where the villain is a disgruntled space Amazon worker. And there's a lot wrong with that episode, but I'm just thinking you've got space Amazon and, you want to critique capitalism and you just have a guy in a warehouse. And the only thing separating out this guy from a warehouse booby traps Amazon boxes from a police procedural set in Las Vegas or something doing, disgruntled Amazon employee booby traps boxes is the TARDIS sequence at the start and the robots. And it's like, really? And then there's the more controversial choice is something like Rosa, where you've got a guy from the 42nd century or whatever, from a super spacey prison in the super spacey future where there's aliens and pansexuals and guys who go to murder rehab and guys who want to fuck poodles. And this guy's just a white supremacist. All right. He's not a humano supremacist. He's not anti-human. He's not an alien who hates humans. He's just a white supremacist. And the only difference between this white supremacist and any white supremacist that we have in stories set in the modern day is he has a space gun and that's it. And the space gun isn't even particularly impressive. Okay. You're Doctor Who. Do something more impressive with that. All right. When you had The Unquiet Dead with Charles Dickens, all right, you had fucking ghost aliens from a time war who were literally aliens ghosts. All right. That's imaginative. That's impressive. All right. When you had critiques of capitalism back in the days of like Tom Baker, all right, you had fucking the Robots of Death, which had all these hyper-capitalist dickheads, but their entire thing was that they were running around in gaudy makeup, with fucking robot makeup dude. All right. And you had another one, which was literally a dude who, when he had a massive like anxiety attack over the corporate losses he was taking, shrank down into his chair and disappeared just from sheer like, do something more imaginative than just a guy. It's a guy.
Yeah. I'd agree with you on Kablam, but I would say that Rosa's not really about the guy. It's not really about the villain. It's about trying to change and correct the course of time itself, kind of thing. That's the real story. It's that side of it, as opposed to just facing down the guy. The guy's just the MacGuffin that gets the thing going. But I do take your point.
No, because the thing is, like, if you were going to, the thing is, like, me and a friend of mine had a conversation about that, where we came up with a concept of, instead of a dude coming back from the future to wreck it because he's an evil racist dude, what about if this moment is so important, if this moment is so cool, it's time traveling tourists from the 51st century and they want to come and get a selfie with Rosa because they're idiots. It's like basically Elon Musk, but with time travel instead of space travel. You know, I'm selling time tours. Go back in time, get a selfie with Rosa Parks. That's not going to fuck up history at all, is it? You know, stuff like that. And if it is, as you say, just a MacGuffin, then as a MacGuffin, it needs to work better. Otherwise, it's just really transparent. So anyway, my point is...
Possibly, but I was trying to sort of move on without actually just dwelling on let's critique certain episodes. Okay. So
my point being to sort of stop critiquing certain episodes, then basically make sure that the sci-fi is sci-fi, and not bollocks, and make sure that whatever it is, it's imaginative and not just some guy. I
was just going to say, it goes both ways because, for example, the Shakespeare episode, Russell T Davies was talking about that. And, you know, the carrion monsters, how they had like the thing of like, you know, the rhyming code and all that kind of thing. And Russell Davies, I remember back when they had Doctor Who Confidentials, and he was talking about that. And he was saying, like, you know, he wanted it to be sci-fi, he wanted it to be science fiction, but sometimes you've got to sort of, you know, let the fantasy side of it run away with it kind of thing. And so for him, it's like, okay, so to us, the science based on rhymes and whatnot doesn't necessarily make sense. But if we say that's what their culture's based on and so on, it's like, fine. That's a sci-fi thing that we'll let them run away with. As long as it stays, that's like, you know, the rules of their world. As long as it stays within the rules of that world, then fine, we can run with it. So I think that's the thing about, okay, yeah, so have the sci-fi, but the aliens can have something that maybe wouldn't be hard sci-fi to us. You know, any hard sci-fi writer or fan would be like, that's not sci-fi, that's fucking fantasy. But as you say, it is like horror sci-fantasy. So yeah, I'd be going along with that one, as long as it was where it does sort of, you know, drift into more fantasy stuff. It sort of stays within the boundaries that's already been established. You know, that we've set the rules of this is what's going on in the world. And then again, like, you know, other episodes, like, you know, the family of blood at the end, when it's like, you know, traps the girl in the picture and all that kind of thing. It's like, okay, so that's when it doesn't get mentioned, it doesn't get explained. So cool stuff like that, where it's like, then I did this thing and it never gets mentioned again, which back then was also when, like, you know, the time war was, we did this thing, but we're not actually going to go into detail. So personally, for like, you know, the big world building kind of thing, I'd rather keep it sort of like, let's not actually go into detail about it. It's like you see glimpses of it. So it's either you get glimpses of it and it doesn't make sense because we don't try and explain it kind of thing. You know, you're only getting a hint of this and a hint of that. Or if you explain it, then things have to actually fit in that, you know, in the rules of that. Because I mean, the Weeping Angels, when they were introduced, they're absolutely fucking brilliant. But then every subsequent episode that featured them afterwards, the rules completely changed. You know, so it's like, it's, you know, they weren't the same creatures. You know, first episode, Blink, it really was Blink, because if you blink, they'll get you. You know, second appearance, you can run away from them. They're all like, you know, it's like, oh, well, they're starving. That excuse. No, it's like you can't have a creature that literally gets you if you blink to then being, like, you know, slowly crawling after you and stuff. The rules changed each time, and each time it diminished them as well. So you need to sort of stick with the rules, and that's the main thing about the individual creatures for me is you can go a bit fantasy. I mean, the Weeping Angels themselves, they say, you know, they come up with some techno babble, you know, chronolocks or whatever they called it, and it's like, yeah, as long as it sticks with that, then it's fine, you know. But you've got to stick with it.
So yeah, I mean, that's like the episode to episode kind of thing for me, is just, you know, making sure that it's imaginative horror sci-fantasy.
Yeah.
That, you know, that isn't too. You've got to make sure, if this doesn't sound really fucking vague and twee, if you're going to be doing Doctor Who, you make sure it's Doctor Who and that it's doing stuff that only Doctor Who does. You know, if it's any old story but you've got a blue box in it somewhere, it ain't Doctor Who. You know, if that makes sense.
I can get your point. It's what would, but then you get into the old discussion of, but what is Doctor Who? So clearly we're talking about, you know, the fantasy stories and, you know, being real imaginative and all that kind of thing. But to some people, it, you know, literally is just a blue box. So what would we decide is what the elements of Doctor Who that we want to focus on, and that's what Doctor Who is to us. Because I do agree with you, but, you know, it's like Russell T Davies, when he was in control, when he first brought it back, it's like, okay, let's keep like, the different adventures and so on, and I'm going back so that we're actually seeing what's happening to the families, back home, or what's happening when the companions go away. What do they do when they want to see the families? So it kept that kind of, the familiar with it kind of thing. And at the time, I didn't really like that because I felt it felt too soap opera-ish. So for me, I didn't really like it at the time. Then when Moffat took over, it was sort of like it became, to me anyway, it felt like it was sort of like going more sort of like fairy tale style, or that was the way it was being projected with the advertising and all the rest of it. And he was like putting a lot more humor into it as well. So he was like straying away from like the real world that Russell T Davies was doing and more into fantasy and more humorous, which was fine. But after a while, it's that thing that I often say when we're doing these conversations is that, sci-fi isn't comedy. Just because it's sci-fi doesn't mean you can, be glib with it. You need to take it seriously. So after a while, it did start to sort of grate on me that Doctor Who was just sort of becoming this like comedy where you could just, characters were almost throwaway characters. And but then with Chibnall, and I agree that I suppose that a lot of the writers have been brought in because they're going for more. They're going more for like that real world element again. So it's like, okay, we want like hard drama writers kind of thing. So it needs that change of tone again. And it's like, no, it's the change of tone they're going for. So whether you agree with it, whether you like it or not, they're going for a particular change of tone.
What they're going for.
And so it's that kind of thing of like, so what kind of tone would we go for? We would be going for like real world. Would you personally, did you really like the humor of Moffat? It's like that kind of thing. So,
okay, to me, not necessarily humor, but wit. Like to me, the best of Doctor Who is witty.
Yes.
Is irreverence in the face of authority. So I quite like John Pertwee's era, for example. Which ironically, it was a very grounded era, so I quite like that. I think if this doesn't sound weird, I'd almost like to set up not like one unit family kind of thing on Earth, and that's just the one thing we keep coming back to, but like one thing that I've done, one thing that I've sort of done in my sort of speculative stuff that I do as fan film scripts in general is there's always this one organization in the spacey future that we go back to, that the Doctor keeps interacting with. There's always this one, organization on Earth, unit that we keep going back to. So I'd almost like to say, here are some people that the Doctor knows in this time frame who might keep calling him or her for help. Here are some people, on Earth in our time frame who keep calling the Doctor for help. Here are some people in this time frame who keep calling the Doctor for help. So you can hop between familiar times and places, and in between that go almost anywhere else. But it's like, there are bases where the Doctor is somebody that people know, and that people can call upon and rely upon and stuff. And there's the wit, and there's the repartee, and there's the little streak of anti-authoritarianism and arrogance, but there's also the comfort of, I'm the Doctor and I've helped people. And look, these are the people I helped and they're my friends now, and that, I think that gives it more. That gives you more to do, and that gives you more size and more to lose as well.
You see, I find that a little bit more restrictive when we're just talking about, how it can be so imaginative and so on. And it's like, but then having it coming back to this group and so on, that's then restricting it. So for me personally, I like the concept of Doctor Who being the TARDIS arrives somewhere. The TARDIS is just, a story tool, so it's a thing that gets the Doctor there. Then you have the adventure, and then once the adventure's over, they get in the TARDIS and they go away. And it's like, but when the TARDIS arrives, I like this. In like the old series, a lot of the time they'd like open the door and say, "Oh, where are we now?" kind of thing. They honestly just didn't have a clue where they'd arrived. And I like that back in the old series as well. Like nowadays, the Doctor is like omniscient. He knows everything, kind of thing. He's like the encyclopedia of the entire galaxy from year dot to the the end of the universe. But back in the old series, he was an explorer. He was an explorer because he didn't know everything. He was actually seeking knowledge. So I don't know how you'd actually go back to that now, but that was more interesting to me. Actually, the Doctor going out there going, where are we? What's going on? Who are these people? And also those people didn't know him, which is the other thing that Moffat sort of realised he'd gone too far with that I am the Doctor and everybody running away. So he's tried to course correct on that one. I think Chibnall's in the first series at least wanted to go back to nobody knows the Doctor and all the rest of it. But that is more sort of my style of the Doctor arrives, the Doctor doesn't know where they are. The Doctor doesn't know every single atom of history. The Doctor is exploring and wanting to find out what's going on, but also people don't generally know the Doctor. There might be an occasional myth. It's that joke about every time there's a wizard, it turns out to be the Doctor kind of thing. It's that kind of thing of like, mythological thing. You could, have certain myths built up around them, but I don't like the Doctor being the center of the center of attention in the sense of this big hero that everybody knows across all time and space. There are rumors of the Doctor. Everybody knows the name, the Doctor.
I don't think that the two concepts are necessarily, because the thing is, it's like I said, you have these episodes where we go back to a place that we establish as this is a familiar place where people know who the Doctor is, like Unit and like Space Unit 1,000 years in the future and what have you. But then in between that, I'm talking like in a 10-episode series, maybe one episode of one or one episode of the other, or one episode each, or 2 episodes here, 1 episode here. But then you still got like 5 or 6 episodes
as a recurring thing over several series. Then just 1 or 2 episodes here and there, kind of thing. I wouldn't want that to be a very regular thing, constantly going back to. Certainly, I wouldn't want like an entire series where if there's 10 episodes, 4 of those are based on this unit thing. But for me, it is the episode to episode. Well, current era episode to episode. Obviously, back in the old days, it ran over several episodes each story, but those episodes run like 20, 25 minutes long as well. So it's like, which is actually part of the thing as well we could discuss here. Would you like to have shorter episodes but run a mini series, or the monster of the week but they're longer episodes, like 45 minutes to an hour long? I mean assuming, I like the second myself personally.
I mean, assuming we have the choice, because what we've got to consider is, unlike in fan films where we can do just about whatever we want, the BBC have a say in stuff like episode numbers, episode lengths and such. So that is, so like my presumption would be, let's start with the fact that right now Jodie Whittaker's series has 10 episodes a season and they're all like mostly single parters. So that's the presumption that we'll run with. But like, okay, so
I mean, like, me, theoretically, though, is that what you would want to do, though? If you did have...
Yeah, like, theoretically, I quite liked, like, say, the Capaldi era, which was 12 45-minute episodes. I think that's a decent... that allows for 2-parters, that allows for even 3-parters if you feel like it, and that doesn't take up too much of the runtime. As well, I think, like, 45 minutes, but with multi-parters. You've got to have 1 or 2 good serials in a season, even if you've got a lot of single-parter episodes.
I think it's got to be when you've actually got enough story to fill it.
Very true.
That's the problem. Is certainly okay. Again, I don't want to get into just sort of critiquing certain episodes, but there's definitely a couple of the 2 and even 3-parters where it really could have just been condensed to 1.
But conversely, there are a lot of the 1-parters where it could have been expanded to 2.
Well, certainly one of my criticisms of the Moffat era in general is that it seems to be like, 45 minutes long, but they get to like 43 minutes and go, oh shit, we need to finish in 2 minutes, let's just wrap up here. And they would end very quickly. Whereas if they'd actually gone to a second episode and been a 2-parter, they'd have had like a whole episode to develop the characters, to develop the story, and come up with a proper ending. Have a little cliffhanger there instead of oh shit, we have to wrap it up. Stick a cliffhanger on and then wrap it up properly in the next episode. So certainly that would have been, to my view anyway, a benefit. But unfortunately, when they did have 2-parters, I think they did tend to just sort of run them over and then still go shit, we've got 2 minutes to finish. Let's wrap them up. So
I mean, to be honest, if you were to ask me like just purely which format I prefer, I think like a compromise between the 2 things. So I quite like the notion of having 2 3-parters, like with shorter episodes. I quite like the McCoy era. Now, if you expand that out, so if you've got like 26 episodes a season, but they're like 2 and 3-parters, I feel like maybe this is just, the fact that I grew up on the videos talking, but I feel like the cliffhanger is part of Doctor Who DNA, that's a thing for me personally, as I feel like set up the mystery, resolve the mystery, or set up the mystery, develop the mystery, resolve the mystery. I think that's part of the thinking behind when the show came back and they had like the stinger, the intro at the beginning of the episode. So you'd have like a little mini cliffhanger, not usually about the Doctor, but the reveal of the monster kind of thing, as some poor person gets eaten or blasted or whatever. So that was like bringing back that cliffhanger to some degree. But yeah, no, I agree. To my memory of watching classic Doctor Who, so, I was like born in 77. So just as I was getting old enough to actually be aware of Doctor Who properly as I was watching it, it got cancelled kind of thing, So a lot of my memory of Doctor Who, though, was as a young child watching the entire run of Doctor Who being constantly like on a loop on Saturday and Sunday morning TV. And that cliffhanger thing was a big thing for me. So,
especially because they didn't even play them in order half the time. You'd be halfway through one serial on a Saturday morning, and you get to the end, and then the TV presenters would come on and say, "Oh, blah blah," and now we're going to watch some, I don't know, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles or whatever, I don't know, some cartoon, and then I have to get up early tomorrow morning to watch the rest of Doctor Who, and you get up to watch the next Doctor Who and the next day, and it'd be a completely different story. I mean, I could be misremembering. God knows the number of times we recorded these, and I'm talking about something, and you're like, that's not true. And then I realised, oh, wait a minute, I completely misremembered that. I've made that up.
When I was watching Doctor Who repeats in like the 90s on BBC Two, when I was a little boy, I think it was they would play. Here's a John Pertwee serial. Here's more of a John Pertwee serial. Here's a bit more John Pertwee. Suddenly, Genesis of the Daleks. Yeah. It's like, okay, why are we suddenly at Genesis of the Daleks? I'm not complaining, but still, what the fuck?
My earliest, just while we're talking about Doctor Who as kids, my earliest memory of the Doctor, actual new episode of Doctor Who was Trial of the Time Lord. And I remember, Syl, the little green guy. He was my earliest memory of, watching Doctor Who and being aware, Doctor Who's on, I'm watching Doctor Who kind of like live, not repeats on Saturday morning or whatever, but actual, this is new Who, and it's like, brand new Doctor Who, no one's ever seen this before kind of thing. So yeah, that was my earliest memory of brand new Doctor Who. But yeah, sorry, digress though. But yeah, no, I do like the modern era thing of like each episode is its own self-contained story, and then with an occasional 2 or 3 parter. But yeah, now you mention it though, the cliffhangers in Doctor Who does seem a big part of Doctor Who. So yeah, there should be some way of either having a couple. I'm not really. See, I'm torn. I do like the self-contained stories, but the cliffhanger is cool as well. So I'm thinking, maybe something like not as obvious, but something like on the old Quantum Leap show, where the episode would end and then the new episode would start. You just get a glimpse of who he's jumped into next time, and every episode would end with him like, "Oh boy," and that's how each episode would end. Usually it's in like a cheap bra or something. So if there's like some way we could do that without it being like obviously like that, but that would get old very quickly, I would imagine.
Possibly, yeah.
But yeah. And also, like trying to cram in a cliffhanger in like a 2-second glimpse of the next episode of Doctor Who, that probably wouldn't work. So yeah, as much as I would like each story to be self-contained, yeah, I suppose we would have to have a couple of 2-parters in, so at least get one good cliffhanger in a series.
Damn straight.
So
okay,
yeah,
it's interesting. Sorry, it's interesting that you mentioned Trial of a Time Lord though, because that sort of brings up the next question, which would be, so obviously Russell T Davis's entire thing was big epic storytelling, but connecting back to Earth a lot with people's families and stuff. Moffat's was very much this dark fairy tale kind of vibe, and Chibnall seems to be going more for, I don't wish to be cruel, but something like Broadchurch in space. Well,
the first series, I definitely got the impression he just wanted it to be stripped of fantasy kind of thing and just being more like real world kind of thing. It's like, it's not so proper, it's just like normal people. It's not, when it's funny, it's not because we're doing comedy, it's because someone said something funny because they're funny. It was more like trying to present it more like real world, which as an approach is something that personally I would prefer myself. I prefer something that, like, at least when you're on Earth, seems like this is the real world. In fact, for myself, if it was just me and it was like, okay, I am like rebooting Doctor Who kind of thing, what I like was, back when, they brought out Torchwood, and Torchwood was like, this secret organization that nobody knew about. That's what I like about these sci-fi shows, is you can imagine them actually happening in the real world and you just don't know about them, So when you see things happening, it's like, this is actually happening in our world. But then, at the end of like, was it the first series of Torchwood, they had the giant demon thing stomping through the city. And it's like, well, that's out the window. And then, season or 2 later, they've got like, people referencing Torchwood down the shops and stuff like that, and it's like, that creature, the fish man in the car that pulled up at the, and the old woman's like, oh, bloody Torchwood. It's like everybody knows about Torchwood, so that kind of just got dismantled, and that whole concept got thrown away. But for me, I like the idea that the Doctor, arrives in our world and we don't know about the stories. The Doctor saves the world and we don't even know about it. So for me, I like that kind of like low key approach to it. So whatever it is that's happening, the Doctor sorts it out without anybody else finding out. So if it is like a big the world's going to be destroyed, then there's obviously going to be some kind of like hub. It's not going to be, apart from maybe a one-off special where you have like, armies of, I don't know, Cybermen or whatever in the streets, because having like big spectacle every now and then is pretty cool. But for me, as soon as you have that, it's no longer in our world. And I don't know, if it was just me doing it, then I would like to have it reset in, right, it's definitely our world and we just don't know about it kind of thing.
That's an interesting point. I mean, I don't know what my take on that particular concept is, purely because my favorite eras are stuff like, Pertwee and Tom Baker. That's my favorite eras, give or take. Or actually, I really like the Eighth Doctor Adventures novels, where a lot of the stories are very small scale, but they're also a lot darker. So to be honest, I would quite like to get away from spectacle for a bit, because I don't think Doctor Who is about spectacle.
No,
I think Doctor Who is about intimate, stories, intimate, high concept, intimate stories.
Yeah.
So like have stuff happen in small sleepy English villages, or in alleyways and stuff, and far away from prying eyes. The underbelly of the world is where all this stuff I think belongs.
What's the old one? It's a vague memory from my childhood now. Tom Baker in The Lighthouse.
Horror of Fang Rock.
That's the one, yeah. See, so that's about as intimate and claustrophobic as you get. It's like, my memory of it anyway is them it's like holed up in a lighthouse, and like, there's a bunch of people in the lighthouse with them, but obviously lighthouses are not that big as you get up the tower and all that kind of thing. But my memory of it is being like in a room halfway up the tower of the lighthouse, and it's like a small cramped space, and they're all like discussing about what's going on. So that for me is Doctor Who, like, a bunch of people trying to figure out how do we get out of this situation, and the Doctor's like the one who's figuring it out, kind of thing.
Base under siege.
To some extent, I mean, it's basically any time you're sort of in a room and there's something outside, you can just throw in it's a base under siege kind of thing. It's just that I don't really go on the fan forums that much anymore, but you did used to get that. Like every time somebody was in a house, in a shed, in a whatever, and there's something outside, it's just a base under siege, and it's like, well, is it though? Because, this story is about something else. It's not about, being invaded or, like trying to protect yourself or blah, blah, blah. It's about this other story that's going on. So to just dismiss it as the base under siege kind of thing, which I know is not what you were saying there, but, I keep hearing, or used to keep hearing fans saying that all the time. And it's like, oh, shut up, you dismissive prick.
Yeah, but that's half of Doctor Who fandom, isn't it?
Yeah.
So anyway, so in terms of like, for me, I quite like to sort of bring it back to sort of like, my roots are in the Eighth Doctor Adventures, really, because like, as much as I love the Pertwee and Baker eras, my roots are the Eighth Doctor Adventures, which is high concept, dark fantasy, but sometimes brought back to the intimate scale of, here's a village, here's a really distant space outpost, here's, all this stuff, and really dark, horrifying stuff is happening. And you can get away with, in those novels especially, you could get away with some really, really dark and horrifying stuff. And I love that. I love the idea of that stuff. I think I definitely would want to go off and do that. And I think very much straying away from big spectacle as much as possible, because if I may be brutally honest, armies stop alien armies. All right. Armies stop armies when it's an army. All right. But when it's a cosmic horror, all right, when it's a Lovecraftian monster, what you need is a clever bloke in a trench coat, or a clever woman in a trench coat, to sort of show up, be like, it's beginning to look a lot like fishmen, stuff like that. Just creep people the fuck out, but bring the scale down, bring the scale down, bring the budgets down for like these stories, spend your money, not on like, getting a billion CGI effects, bring it down, spend your money on building some nice claustrophobic sets, and really wring every penny out of like making that the intimate, horrifying experience of family TV on a Sunday evening or a Saturday evening, because Doctor Who belongs on Saturdays and I'll not hear a word against it. But, so that being said, I don't know if now would be the appropriate time to talk about the big crazy concept that I have for Doctor Who, or if I ever took over, or if you want to talk about some stuff before I get into the big crazy concept I have.
No, I mean, what you just said there ties in with what I was saying, that for me, it's same thing. I do agree that the Doctor was better when it's it's the Doctor in a room talking to people. It's not the Doctor facing down an army or whatever. But that ties in with what I was saying of like keeping it small scale, as in it's not the Doctor facing an army that's taking over the world. It's the Doctor stopping an army arriving by stopping the portal opening or whatever. It's all talking the leader out of invading in the first place, that kind of thing.
Especially since like every time it's an army, the actual manner in which the Doctor defeats it always seems to be a bit lackluster. So like to be really, really reductive about Doctor Who finales with big alien armies invading, it always seems to come down to flick switch to beat army, pull lever to beat army, press many buttons to beat army, break thing to beat army, and it's like, that's not really like the manner in which you approach it can be pretty clever, but fundamentally there's nothing particularly impressive about the Doctor pulls a lever and the Daleks go away. The Doctor, tells Danny Pink to go blow himself up and the Daleks and the Cybermen or whatever go away. That's not clever. The Doctor waves his sonic screw. I love the sonic screwdriver as a shorthand device. Like, a lot of people bitch out the sonic screwdriver, but the thing is, back in the day when you had 4-part episodes, you could afford to spend 15 minutes of the Doctor picking up a leaf. Smells the leaf. This is not a natural leaf. I'm going to keep exploring. Here's another clue. All right. Nowadays, you've got 45 minutes. You have to shrink some of that down to scan. Okay, this is a thing, and this is a thing. Like, there's some, but again, like, as much as I love Capaldi's last series and I love Capaldi's last, few episodes, him beating the Cybermen on that ship basically boiled down to, I've set up a bunch of bombs and I'm going to wave my sonic screwdriver around and blow up the bombs. When actually you're on a spaceship, there's more you can. It's a bit, reductive of me, I suppose, to say, come up with something cleverer, because I wasn't there. I wasn't the one writing the damn thing. Maybe there was no better decision to be made at the time.
No,
but you're on a spaceship.
I mean, this is said quite often, but the reason a lot of people are drawn to Doctor Who is that it's the Doctor coming up with a clever way of solving the problem. If it's Bond, he's just going to shoot the bad guy and defuse the bomb, but he's not going to defuse it by using nuclear physics. He's just going to cut the red wire. It's going to be that complicated kind of thing. Well, that's Bond. You expect that if you go into a Bond film, you're paying your ticket because you're going to get car chases and bang bang, I'm shooting people and here's an attractive woman who wants to sleep with me. Doctor Who, though, we're watching Doctor because you want to see the Doctor doing something clever, something out the box. No, I again, I agree with you on that one.
So,
I mean, I think I agree with you about, it's like, you don't have the time in the story and episode, because it is condensed. You haven't got the time to have too much, looking at clues and that kind of thing. But at the same time, I think in recent years, there has been an overabundance of just a lot of exposition, just being waving the sonic screwdriver and then moving on with it. You need to. You need to get a balance there. That's all.
No, I tend to agree with that. But it's a balance that can be found.
Yeah,
essentially.
It's like, at the end of the day, if you're writing the script and you put a locked door, then the Doctor just waves a sonic screwdriver and walks through the door. Why did you write a locked door in the first place? Well, no. Here's the thing. I disagree with that. Okay, so for example, it's a matter of verisimilitude, right? So some people are like, oh, why is there a locked door on this spaceship if he's just going to wave the sonic screwdriver? The answer often being, because if there wasn't a locked door on this spaceship, you'd be asking, why the fuck isn't there a door on this spaceship that just stops any old random fucker walking through? If you're in a military base, you can have that occasionally, but it's
but this is, this is the thing though, is that, there is a balance between why is it there just to be immediately solved, and it's there because it would be there if this was real, Yeah,
I mean,
if that makes sense.
You've got to have the balance there, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm just talking about when you're a writer making up a made-up world and a made-up thing, so on and so forth. Quite often it's a completely made-up scenario, and I'm going to make a locked door. Then the Doctor gets through the door because the way the sonic screwdriver, and they just walk on. It's like, okay, backtrack a second, Mr. Writer. Why did you put the locked door in the first place if it's not going to be any kind of an obstacle whatsoever? Now, fair enough, if it's like there's a locked door because this is a prison and there'd be a locked door, fair enough. But that's again where it is part of the story. But what I'm saying is you need to avoid putting things in when it's of no consequence to the story whatsoever, and then the Doctor just moves on. It's just something to be avoided. Oh, no,
I agree. I'm struggling to think of specific examples where that specifically has come up.
Okay, well, when you have an episode where it's a locked door because there would be a locked door, the Doctor uses a sonic screwdriver, goes through the door, and that's a scene in the episode. Then you have another episode where there's a locked door because there would be a locked door, the Doctor uses a sonic screwdriver to get through. And then there's another episode where there's a locked door because there would be... After the 10th episode, over the course of a couple of series, you get to the point where it's like, stop writing these scenes in, we get it, the Doctor can just walk through doors, just cut to the part where they're actually in the room kind of thing. There's no point, putting it in every other episode, oh, look, I get through these locked doors with my sonic screwdriver. You can cut those scenes out, and then you've got like an extra couple of minutes to do something interesting instead of just, here's another locked door that you walk through with a sonic screwdriver. It's like, yes, do it in the first couple of episodes, first series, have a couple of episodes doing it. But after a few episodes, we've seen it, move on. You don't have to keep doing it all the time.
Fair enough. So, is now the time where I get to start talking about the big idea, or do you have a big idea first?
No, you go ahead with your big idea.
Okay. So, this is a tricky one, because the thing is, recent Doctor Who series have had, I don't know if like entire eras have had big concepts that have driven them, that have been resolved and stuff. But like, for me, I had this crazy idea, and so to backtrack a little, there's this thing that gets thrown about a lot when you say, so-and-so thing, disrupts the canon or damages the canon or doesn't make sense within the canon. And recently there's been this thing that people have been saying a lot, which is, oh, there is no canon, which I disagree with, because there is a canon. There are things that happen, and those things affect other things. Otherwise, none of this makes sense. None of this matters. And why am I bothering to watch this when I can just ignore all of it if I feel like it?
That's it. I mean, it's like, at the end of the day, sometimes, yes, writers make mistakes, but in general, they try to stick with what's gone before. It's just that, unless you're a massive super fan, you don't remember every detail of every episode. So, yeah, sometimes they make mistakes, and sometimes, yeah, the showrunner might decide, you know what, that was a bit of a dumb idea, and it was only one episode, so let's just ignore it and move along, shall we? That does happen occasionally, but that doesn't mean there is no canon. But anyway, sorry, please go ahead.
Well, the thing is, basically, one thing that I didn't like I'm not going to start with the I didn't like this. I'm going to start by just telling you the idea. And the idea is pretty simple, which is, out there's something called the Leakley Bible, all right? And the Leakley Bible was the 1996 TV movie's first draft of an idea. And it was complete bollocks, because it was a complete reboot of Doctor Who, in which the Doctor was the grandson of Barusa, the president of the Time Lords, and the Master's his half-brother, and the Master murders Barusa, but Barusa's spirit ends up in the TARDIS, and the Doctor has to go looking for his long-lost dad, Ulysses, to figure out all this shit about Rassilon, blah-de-blah-de-blah-de-blah-de bollocks. All right? So, this is how this starts. The Doctor, as in the Doctor that, we all know and love, and so on and so forth, lands on a planet and runs into the Doctor from the Leakley Bible, as played by Paul McGann. And they have an adventure where the Doctor's all like, I have no idea what the hell is going on here, because I know that face, but I'm pretty certain that I never wore that particular combination of weird clothes, and I'm pretty certain I never had that haircut, and oh shit, you've just been killed by the monster of the week. And fundamentally, like, it's a big setup of this Doctor is dead, like this version of the Eighth Doctor is dead, and leaves the Doctor basically with the task of going off and finishing his work, going off and finding Ulysses, because, quote unquote, Ulysses has the answer to everything. All right. So it's a bit of a quest thing. It's a bit of a long running quest thing, basically, because I like it when Doctor Who has long running quest things. I like the Key to Time series, so sue me. Where you'll find clues to this character and clues to whatever there's going wrong, and you have even more random wacky stuff showing up. Like, I don't know, if you could get him, Rowan Atkinson as the Doctor shows up for an episode, or the Master shows up as played by a guy who's never played the Master before, referencing some adventure that the Doctor hasn't got the Scooby-Doo about. Like, I escaped from Zelphon. I've never been to Zelphon. There is no planet Zelphon. I still escaped from there, and now I'm going to do this. And basically the end of that, whether it be one series or two series, would come down to, yeah, time is fucky. Time is so fucky because there's been time wars and time travelers and alternate timelines and parallel timelines and merging timelines and branching timelines and people turning time into a Swiss cheese that, you know what? As of now, everything's canon. and none of it's canon. And if you want it to be canon, it is. And if you don't want it to be canon, it isn't. And, you know, it creates this basic premise where, because we've had entire series where, yeah, aliens were literally marching down the road. How can nobody remember that? Answer, nobody remembers that because as far as these people are concerned, that did not happen. You stepped outside the door into a different version of history. And every time you step outside the door, you're in a different version of history. And it's completely effed. So Gallifrey is gone. But no, Gallifrey's there. You can go visit Gallifrey if you want. Or you can go visit the burnt-out Hulk of Gallifrey if you also want. You know? And if you want to... And the thing is, that then expands things out. All right? That massively expands things out. Because suddenly you're not stuck with Doctor Who is, you know, 1 through 13 people, you know? Doctor Who is not just those 13 people plus the timeless children, whatever that stuff. Doctor Who is literally... You could stop Doctor Who right now, come back in 2 years, have a completely different Doctor Who show up. All right? We don't know if that Doctor Who has anything to do with these Doctor Whos. If there is some connection, but it also zapped this way and zapped this way. You know? It's great. It's basically because the way I look at it is, and this is where I'm going to come back to the thing where I didn't want to start with, I didn't like this. I didn't like the Timeless Children. But if you gave me the job of taking over Doctor Who, it would be childish and churlish to retcon the Timeless Children out of existence when there are people who like it. So the only alternative is to go even bigger and crazier. The Timeless Children is canon and isn't canon. And whichever it is, it depends entirely on you, the viewer, to decide. All of those Big Finish audios that are of dubious canon, nope, they are canon if you want them to be canon. All the 8th Doctor novels that make no fucking sense in canon, nope, they're canon because time is fucky. And any of it is valid, and none of it is valid. And yeah, we're following, like, in practice, what that means is, yeah, the TV show is canon, and it all happened. But at the same time, actually did it. And that then opens up this conversation that's never really had about the fact that the Doctor is a time traveler. The Doctor has been traveling in time for 10,000 plus years, or however long it is. Okay, you've been traveling in time this long. Actually, how sure are you that you are still the same person you were when you set out? Actually, how sure are you that you were played by William Hartnell and not David Bradley? Actually, how sure are you that there was a war doctor or wasn't a war doctor? Actually, how sure are you that Gallifrey was like this and not like this? Actually, how sure are you what colour robes the Time Lords wore? Actually, how sure are you how wonky the Brigadier's moustache was? Or if he really was wearing an eye patch the entire time? You know? Actually, how sure are you of all that stuff? All right? Every time the Daleks show up and it's like, no, hang on, you didn't look like that because you looked like that. No. They've looked like both. And you can bring it to, like, if you wanted to go nuts with it, you could expand that out. Your first series is finding out just how fucky time is. All right? And then you break that up. So you have like whole seasons where this is how fucky time is. This is how fucky it's all drifting out. And the Doctor is running into the consequences of this constantly. And then at the last series of your run, okay, how do we then, with how fucky time is, we cannot keep having time be this fucky, right, in universe without the Doctor trying to do something. So the final season is the Doctor, roughly speaking, stitches this thing all back together into a rough line of events. And if that rough line of events considers everything canon and nothing canon, you know, at the same time, or if everything happened at some point, we're no longer sure when, we're no longer sure how, but the point is the timeline is intact and we can carry on in the knowledge that in this new version of the Doctor's timeline, whatever you think counts, counts. And then, of course, some other fucker comes along and completely changes everything when the next guy comes in. But the point is, you've made that effort. And you've made that effort in a way that takes advantage of Doctor Who's inherent premise, which is time fuckery. You know?
Okay, so,
it's...
So the thing is... So obviously, you've obviously thought a lot about this, whereas it's like a new concept to me. It's a lot to unpack with all that. But my initial reaction to it is, if you're just sort of coming out and saying that none of it matters, which means all of it matters, so the thing that actually hits home first and hardest is none of it matters. You know, that's a big takeaway from it. It's like, oh no, but that means everything matters. It's like, yeah, but it also means that none of it ultimately matters. So what's the point, kind of thing? You know, so, but as a concept, as a subtle thing that's like, gets referenced, as opposed to just being a blatant, here's another Doctor, oh, they're dead. Oh shit, what does that mean? And having a big discussion about it. I think as a subtle thing, like, referencing, like, time's not fixed, time's in flux, that kind of thing, just, hinted at with Russell T Davies, was like taking that concept and running with that a little bit. Then I think that might be a way to go. But I wouldn't be a big fan of doing it as like a big story all about how it doesn't matter, because for me,
well, the thing is,
for me, like, it's like, yeah, it might mean that all these other things, like, I don't know, like you said, the Rowan Atkinson Doctor, for example, you can include that if you want. But it also means that ultimately the main timeline of stories the continuity doesn't actually matter, kind of thing. And and as a long-term fan of it, it's like, well, I like the ongoing story. The ongoing story is part of it, not just the individual adventures.
Yeah, but the problem is, and okay, first off, what this is it's not creating something that is wholly radical, because what you've got to consider is time is already fucky. Doctor Who's timeline is already fucky. All right, we have gone to 3 different versions of Atlantis. We've seen half a dozen different variations of like what the future is for humanity and when planet Earth ends and how planet Earth ends. All right,
that's over the course of like the entire 55 plus years. You're talking about within a season, just like running home that none of it matters. That we couldn't go here, and then just flick to the future, and we'll come back in a couple of weeks, and it'll be a different version of today anyway. It's ultimately saying actually what we do today doesn't matter, because if we're going forward into the future or back in the past, and then come back to today, time's that fucky that it could be completely different anyway. It's not only that the backstory doesn't matter, but what you're doing now doesn't matter. It's like, oh look, this planet's going to get destroyed by the Daleks. Let's save everybody. Fuck it, let's just go off somewhere else. We'll come back another day and it'll be different anyway. It's like it removes the stakes.
I mean, for one thing, obviously I've explained this in the course of 5 minutes.
Well, yeah.
No, because here's the thing. What I'm talking about is very much like the DS9 Season 8 approach. The exact hows and whys of it. And the thing is, like, yeah, okay, so you go in it, and the point is everything that you want to be canon is canon, and everything that you don't want to be canon is not canon, because everything matters, nothing matters. That's like the net result. But it's not like, as a marketing ploy, you'd go in and go, this means none of it matters. And the thing is, yeah, from your fan perspective, you're sitting there and you're thinking, from the fan/writer perspective, you might be sitting there thinking, well, it gets rid of the stakes. But actually, does it? Because if you were any other character like the Master, you might go, fuck it, I'm just not going to bother. The Doctor doesn't, not bother. And actually, you can then explore, okay, so what is the interrelation here? Does it matter if I save these people? There's a conversation to be had there. Okay, can I now change history? Will it fuck history over if history doesn't matter? Okay, can I actually go do more things? Can I kill Hitler?
But this is why they kept having things introduced to the show, like fixed points in time. So it's like the Doctor's always saying, we can change this, change that, but this is a fixed point in time. We can't change this. So it's like, yeah, there have been times when it's been contradicted and all the rest, but then the writers have realised that, so then they've like tried to sort of, step back from it and say, actually, some things have to be allowed to play out, or some things can't be changed. But no, as a concept, as in, the time is in flux, that kind of thing, and that things can change when remembering things differently. It's an idea that I kind of like, but then I don't like it at the same time. And it's weird, because then you have it that the Doctor is the only stable thing, and it's just like, it's not just a blue box going through time and space, it's a blue box just like sloshing about in a bucket of chaos, and it's like they open the doors and there's literally no idea where it's going to be. So it just depends on how heavily, because obviously you're describing the concept to me of, it means everything's in canon and nothing's in canon, you can choose and pick and choose yourself. But the way you've described it to me means that it's like, okay, well, story to story then, does next week's episode even matter? Does last week's episode matter? So it's how heavily are you leaning in on it, kind of thing. Because if it is just like references to, well, time's in flux, and it's my job as a Time Lord to make sure it stays, as it should be, and we've just seen another version of the Doctor who's a younger version of me die, so I'm going to have to work really fucking hard to figure this one out. If you're really going on that storyline, then yeah, it's just sort of a case of how heavily you want to lean into that side of the story, basically.
I mean, this is it, though, is that, again, it's like DS9 Season 8. We're not discussing this as this is the final product to get, to go about. This is like the initial stage of, that's the broad strokes concept. Now, how the fuck do I sit down and write episodes about this? And it could be something, because the thing is, the timeless children and the mystery of that, if you say that, blurt it out in one conversation in 5 minutes, this is what it's all about, people will be like, well, fuck that then. I mean, people have still been like, fuck that then, but at least they tried to sort of spread it out and, seed it in a bit more and not make it completely change how everything works so far. But, and the thing is...
Well, that's it. If it's like, take the Timeless Children, it's like, there's one episode where Jodie Whittaker's Doctor meets another version of the Doctor that she doesn't remember, and then they move on. And then it's only when we get to the finale that we kind of get told, oh, this is what that's all about. And it's like, oh, shit. But that's the finale, and they move on. And so then, like, the audience is left like, what the fuck's going on, kind of thing. But that kind of thing, like, if it's like that level, then yeah, that'd be an okay thing. But you sort of like, but you started it though by saying, has this adventure with the other Doctor, realizes shit, time's fucked up, I'm going to have to go. It was like the whole impetus of the story was figuring out what's going on. But to meet this guy, which, I mean, whatever version of the story it would be. For me, it would be we'd figure out our own adventure for him to go on, as opposed to recycling this old story from the past for myself. I don't want to like pick the bones of this old dead story kind of thing. I'd rather like figure out our own version of whatever it is that's going on.
I mean, what I like about going back to that old dead story is, okay, one, there is admittedly a very fanish part of me that just think it's hilarious to go back to something that is the absolute nadir of Doctor Who ideas and actually bring it to the now and do something interesting with it. That interests me, because I'm always interested in going back to older ideas and going, well, actually, no, what can you do with that hasn't been done before, But also what interests me about giving it an impetus is, I guess, by giving it an impetus, by giving it some reason to go out there and think, something's actually a bit fucky about this. Like, take the Timeless Children thing, take the mystery of, the Ruth Doctor and stuff. It's always kind of bugged me that, the Doctor, especially in episodes where the Doctor hears about these mysteries and then decides, all right, I'm going to be stupid and irresponsible and fuck off and do... Like, I know the Doctor is a bit stupid and irresponsible at times, but it's like, you just saw another version of you that you've never met. You just learned about this weird girl in an astronaut suit that's disappeared. And you're just going to slack it off and go on adventures instead without even trying to look into it. Okay, no. Like, you get given an impetus, all right? This guy, other you who's just died tells you, go and find this guy. He has, the answers. Okay, that is an impetus. And actually, if you go out, and even if it's just a case of, I have no idea where to look for this guy, I'm going to, keep an ear out. And then, a couple of episodes later, oh, that's an ear out. Sorry, where did you get that name from? Okay, he went that direction. Okay, we might go in that direction. Oh, a thing's happening. It gives it a little impetus. It's something to weave in slowly. And then you get to the end of it, and it's not going to be as simple as, this guy giving a big exposition dump. Time is fucky, nothing matters. But, potentially it's like, time is way more in flux than you think it is. Even the fixed points that you hold so dear don't exist anymore. How much of your life is actually the life that is actually in the history book? If you went home right now, all right, would your life as you remember it be the life that's in a history book? Do you know? Do you know? I don't know. Well, go look. It's really serious. And then you've got now the impetus for a second season of, okay, actually, I've just gone to Earth in that century and I had no idea what was going on, but I was pretty certain that it wasn't meant to be like that. And, okay, now I've gone to this time. And it's still, I don't know what's going on. So like you were saying earlier, you like the Doctor being an explorer who's like, but you don't know how you'd go back to that. Answer, now you know, because the Doctor goes out and is like, okay, I don't know what's going on. That is interesting because I was pretty certain I had geography and stuff down pat for this era of time and space. But okay, I'm going to do a thing. Standard adventure, except now, okay, that's how that is like. Go forward a few hundred years. Oh yeah, by the way, I've been to this planet. Oh, no. That planet's like a barren rock or something. Nobody's ever lived there. Okay, because that's bollocks, because I was just there, like, last episode. What the fuck?
I mean,
so that builds, you know.
A lot of what you're saying here, though, is stuff that they're doing Doctor Who anyway, to be fair. You know, it's like, I've been rewatching the Christopher Eccleston era, and it's on that when they visit Satellite 5, and obviously it's all fucked up. You know, it should be the great and bountiful human blah blah blah, and it's not. And it's like, well, why is it not? Because something's happened. You know, a lot of the Doctor Who stories are things are not. Let's course correct history and get it back on track, kind of thing. So I mean, it would just be sort of like, you know, if it's something that's mentioned like that, it's like things are not right. And you know, and then there's like an episode where it's like, yeah, no, it's not right. It's bad, isn't it? You know, have you noticed how you're getting more and more of these adventures where you arrive and it's not as it should be? And it's like that kind of thing. Yeah, it's more the on the nose story of go and find this guy who's got all the answers, and then finding that guy and blah blah. That's what I personally prefer to avoid. I prefer more like subtle hints and allow the audience to, like, you know, pick it up as they go along, kind of thing. But
I mean, this is the thing though, is that, you know, it sort of depends how you play these things. Because obviously, when I initially framed it, you know, this dead doctor guy goes, go find this guy. He has the answers. But does this guy have all the answers, or is his explanation as simple as, no, time is just more broken than you think it is. I don't know why, and I don't know how, and I don't know how to fix it. And oh shit, I have now succumbed to plot-induced terminal illness. You know, it's as simple as, like, you know, you build up, like, ideally, like any series with a threaded arc that's episodic. What you've got is, you know, episodic, tentpole for the arc, episodic, tentpole for the arc, episodic, big tentpole for the arc, propelling you to the next arc. Yay, we're at the next arc. Tentpole, episodic, tentpole. You know.
Okay. To phrase it this way, then, when people talk about the last series of Doctor Who, they talk about that timeless children bollocks, as opposed to the full series. So people would focus on this. So all that stuff about canon not mattering anything bollocks, blah blah blah. That's what I mean. It's like, is that what you want people to think of the series, kind of thing? It's like how much you're leaning into it. If you're leaning into it a lot, then that is what people are going to say. You know. So
well, it depends how it's worded though, and how it's explained within the episode. Because, like, here now, I'm explaining it as what it effectively means is canon doesn't matter because time is like this. All right. But, you know, the way it could end up phrased in the thing is, okay, actually, no, I've stepped out, you know, and Gallifrey's back when it shouldn't be, or Gallifrey's gone when it shouldn't be, or what have you. All right. What does that mean? Time is more in flux. That doesn't necessarily mean that canon doesn't matter, just that history is, you know, more radically woo than we thought it was. And again, I don't have these answers because I haven't written the thing. I haven't got a clue how I would exactly phrase it, how exactly it would be emphasized. And I won't until and unless some fucker with $1 billion buys Doctor Who and gives me the reins, which they won't. So, you know, I've thought about this only in the sense of I have a loose concept that this is something that's in the history of the fan films that I write. You know, this is something that happened to my Doctor in his far, I can't even say far enough back history, that, you know, the quest for Ulysses happened, and the consequences that, you know, might have ended up with, okay, Doctor at this point in his life, Gallifrey is restored. I mean, another thing that I sort of wanted to do with it, to a certain extent, was actually give the opportunity for, you know, different stories to be told, you know, that aren't necessarily, like, bound to this numbering of Doctors. Because I think a big problem with any changes to the canon fundamentally comes to the fact that it is this one row. Whereas actually I'd like the idea of stopping, coming back, the new Doctor, and being like, okay, anything could have happened. Anything. That's something that I've always had a really strong feeling about is, no. Literally stop and then start again with a new guy, and that new guy could be the next one or the next 100 along. And the point is, we wipe the slate completely clean. Okay, you know,
you're breaking up on my end now. I don't know what's happening.
Yeah, that's probably the internet. That's probably the internet being a bit dicky. Bless it. So,
but as I say, you've sort of thought about this and you've got sort of, you know, an idea of how it would work. I'm just sort of reacting to it. So that's sort of my reaction to it, is that it could go too far, and it means that nothing that's happened matters, and nothing that will happen matters, and nothing that's happening in the episode matters. But if it is more like, you know, the subtle thing of, like, you know, as you say, a couple of episodes in, there's one episode where it gets sort of like hinted at, and then like, you know, further on it gets expanded upon, then that's fine. You know, a couple of sort of references from the Doctor. I mean, stuff that's set on Earth history. Again, it's like when I was saying about, you know, the Doctor exploring stuff, it's like, you know, it's something about arriving in Earth history and sort of being like, oh, I've always wanted to find out what it was like, you know, in a Roman legion or whatever. And it's like, you know, the historical stuff. And then you find out that the Roman legion's actually, you know, fucking Autons or whatever. But the point is that you've then got this other alien thing going on. So if it is like as subtle as, wait a minute, but this Roman legion actually did go there, and they can't do that if it's because, you know, they're taken over by the Autons. So then it's like, right, well, we need to fix the history kind of thing, because that's our history, you know. And if it's like, you know, but history's in flux and all the rest of it, then, well, it's like the unquiet dead, you know, they have to stop the thing from happening, because then our future, our present day isn't going to happen, you know. So, but obviously our present day does happen because it's where we are, kind of thing. Yeah, I mean, yeah, as a concept, it's like, it's that whole thing about, you know, history being in flux, which is in the TV show anyway. So like expanding on that and looking at that more closely, it's like, yeah, that could work. For me, it was just the way it was presented at first. My initial reaction was sort of like, yeah, but, you know, having this guy, and then, you know, that's like, you know, this guy literally saying, no, it's really fucked up, it's really bad, you need to figure it out, kind of thing. It's like, then, I don't know, it's like, how fucked up is it? Is it like fucked up just in the bubble of this particular series, or is it literally like going past over the entire series? In which case, the lifelong fans will be like, well, what's the point of me watching all those episodes, you know?
Yeah, but I mean, it's not like Doctor Who's a stranger to that, because arguably it's done that kind of thing a half dozen times before. Like,
yeah,
what was the point of me watching?
This was the same before, though. It's like, yeah, they've had, like, you know, the second Big Bang that kind of rebooted things. But in general, they don't go ahead and just like reboot things and say like, oh, everything that's happened before doesn't matter. You know, that's the thing. I mean, I'm saying it's like a fine line that you don't want to cross that line. But no, but I've always liked, it's like the concept of Doctor Who of like, you know, we need to keep the timeline on track. You know, there's the Tom Baker episode, I forget which one it was now, where
Pyramids of Mars. They go back in time, and then they go forward in time and see that the present day is a wasteland because they haven't stopped Sutekh yet.
Yeah, that's the one I was thinking of, yeah. So like, even going back to that, it's sort of showing, no, time can change. So it's like, well, so if time is in flux more than it should be in flux, so we're noticing there's more and more of these time influx moments, which for me would be better told through, you know, taking a companion to like, oh, let's visit this really cool space restaurant, and then the space restaurant's, you know, Dalek restaurant. It's like, oh no, the Dalek shouldn't be here. Then it's like figuring out why the Dalek's here when they shouldn't be here, and, you know, all that kind of thing. So it's set up in somewhere off in space. I wouldn't want to, like, you know, mess around with our history, because we know what our history is. So it either ends up being our history is not what we thought it was, or the Doctor comes and it's made apparent that the Doctor Who series started in a different timeline, and then the Doctor course corrects and it ends up being our timeline, which itself could be an interesting story depending on your point of view on that. But yeah, if it's kept as like a general storyline, just, you know, something that's like hinted at rather than, you know, being presented as the be all and end all, this is what the entire premise of the series is about, which is what you saw, you know, explained it to be more a bit later, then yeah, that could work. I mean, for me, it's the key thing for me is the whole concept of, okay, part of it is not just the storyline of you arrive in the TARDIS, you open the doors, you go. I like the TARDIS being, once it arrives, it's like this solid object. It's like Stonehenge or something. You know, it's this thing that's like, it's just this movable object that's like always been there as far as people are concerned. You know, and it's like, when it arrives, you come out, the TARDIS is kind of like part of that place now. It's not a vehicle that you fly around in. You know, for me, it's like the TARDIS is like, no, boom, there it is. And that's where it fucking stays throughout the story. You know, it's a solid object in this time period. It's now part of the time period in this space. I don't like it when in the stories they have the TARDIS then flying around, and in the Moffat era, they started doing it all the time. Instead of dematerializing and rematerializing, every time it was like flying through space to arrive somewhere. And it's like, since when was this a fucking Enterprise? It dematerializes and rematerializes. That's how the TARDIS works. You know, so for me, I really want to, like, you know, have that as being part of the story, that boom, we've arrived. Now the TARDIS can't leave again, because if we get in the TARDIS and leave again, we'll no longer be part of this timeline. You know, and then that's, if we come back to this timeline, other things might have happened and it'll be completely different. You know, because otherwise the TARDIS does just become the MacGuffin of, fuck it, yeah, let's just go back to last Tuesday before they invaded and stop it from happening. It's like, no, you've arrived, you're in part of the timeline now, you've got to sort it before you get back in the TARDIS. Well, you can go in the TARDIS, you just can't fly off. The only time for me it was really was, again, Christopher Eccleston era, that when they first had it like flying across space at the Daleks, but that was more because it was as if it had been like ejected from the space station, like it had been shot at them like a big, you know, cannonball or something. And it was one of those things, seeing it live, you know, on air, not live, but, you know, seeing it for the first time when it was first aired, and that shot when it's like flying across thing, like after seeing the episode, it's like next time and you see the TARDIS, it's like, yes, it felt earned. But then after that, it's like every subsequent episode when you've seen it flying around, apart from maybe in The Runaway Bride, it's like, it's just generally been let's show it just for the sake of showing it, you know, which I'm really not a fan of. I'm also not a fan of showing the TARDIS in the time vortex either. I mean, I don't mind it just as a little segue. So you see it dematerialize and then you show it flying down the time vortex and you see it rematerialize. But that for me is then turning the time vortex into more of a physical space. Because again, going back to the very, 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 very early Doctor Who, it was just like a thing used to describe what happens when you're in between dematerialization and rematerialization. It's not an actual physical space with a tunnel that you fly down. You know, it's just the, you know, the formless space that you are in between those two states of existence. So that's something for me that modern era Who that I'd want to get rid of, is having the time vortex being like a physical space that they just sort of hang around in. It's, let's say, yeah, there's a little segue between, you know, when they're flying from here to there. But in general, you know, the number of episodes where they're just sort of hanging around in the time vortex, for me, I would avoid that, because that's then creating the time vortex as being an actual physical space, a place where you can just visit. You know, it's not the moon. It's, you know, it's not the Roman era. It's none of it. It's the space of nothingness in between. But by creating as a tunnel, suddenly, well, it is a thing. It's a tunnel. I can see it. You know, and it was made worse when Moffat took over and decided to redesign it as clouds, and then Chibnall took over and decided to redesign it again as, like, you know, weird sparkly thing where it's supposed to be. But it's like, by designing and redesigning it, and it's like, well, you're making it more and more of a physical structure. You know, especially in like the recent one where it's like, oh yeah, there's always Daleks hanging around in the time. What? Like it's literally become just a labyrinth in between time zones and stuff. So yeah, for me, that's, I mean, it goes back to then, you know, when in the 10th episode, is it the thingy, the what's it called? Fuck me, Satan Pit. When you know, saying like, you said you exist outside of time, and it's like, well, you can't exist outside of time. You know, if you say before time or after time, blah blah blah, but you can't exist outside of time. It's like, well, yeah, you can, just a fucking time vortex. Apparently, that's a place that's outside of time. You know, so fairly soon you're going to have like time vortex parasites invading the Earth or something like that. So you got carried on the back of the TARDIS or something. You know, it's going to be like that kind of thing coming off soon. But yeah, so sorry, just rattling on about the time vortex now. But for me, it's like, yeah,
I mean, this is the thing, though, is that, I mean, this is the thing, though, isn't it? Is that what you're describing is the time vortex as less, you know, a mountain filled with holes like Moria or something, and the time vortex is like an ocean. But the thing is, like, it's an ocean that's always moving regardless of anything. So if anything, that's something that maybe in the concept that I have, explore that, you know. Okay, the time vortex is an ocean, right? If we land somewhere, if we like land on the ocean floor or whatever, we step out and we're now in a point in time, right? We're in a point in time and we are among that point in time. If we get in and go, all right, and we come back later, the ocean will have moved on and it will never be the same water again, even if we land in the same point in the ocean, you know? And, you know, emphasizing that part of it, emphasizing the whole thing is constantly shifting. You step out that door, all right, and you are part of that moment in time and it's happening around you. But then when you come back, probably won't be the same. It just can't be. And the thing is, like, you know, depending on how dark and Lovecraftian you want to go with it, like, for example, yeah, actually play with our history, you know? Like, I like the idea of playing with our history, because Doctor Who's already played with our history a bit in terms of stuff like unit dating and stuff. That's an era that it turned into a play on it, you know? It was the 70s or was it the 80s? I can never remember, you know, but actually, you know, you step out the door and you go, yeah, okay, the big events, sure. You can name me the dates of so-and-so and so-and-so, but actually, you know, see that bloke there? We leave and we come back, that bloke might have a completely different hair color or a completely different set of eyes, all right? 1 minute, Captain Kirk might look like William Shatner, and the next minute he looks like Chris Pine. And all right, the big stuff is the big stuff. And time flows along a current that, roughly speaking, keeps the big stuff looking the same. But the little stuff, the stuff that you only see when you're like hopping into an alleyway somewhere and you're seeing, oh, that bloke there, he used to have a bigger crooked nose. That's the stuff that changes.
Yeah. I mean, I can get behind that. It's just wouldn't want it to be a big focus of the show. That's all. But other than that, though, what are the key things then that we really ought to discuss? Like the TARDIS, for example. Then, what kind of TARDIS interior would you go for? Because obviously, there's like the classic era clean TARDIS, and then there's like the older worn kind of TARDIS when it came back in the Russell T Davies era. And then the whimsical TARDIS when Matt Smith took over. To then the sci-fi TARDIS, to now the crystalline structure TARDIS. But there's all kinds of stuff in between as well. So
my preference would be something built a bit like Capaldi's TARDIS, but with more of the surface detailing of the classic ones. So like white paneling, roundels, the works. To me, I'm writing a fan film script right now, and I basically have the Doctor describe the TARDIS as, this is a Navy vessel I squat in. I stole a boat and I squat in it. So, the TARDIS is not a living space. It's not a space that people are designed to live in like it's your front room or something. The TARDIS is, it's a ship. It's a ship that was built for a purpose, all right? And yeah, it's got fucking space magic or whatever that makes it look like different things. But at the end of the day, this is a utilitarian space that some fucking lazy student moved into with his granddaughter a few thousand years ago. And ever since then, he's been...
Sorry, I was just going to say that's kind of what I liked with when it came back in the Russell T Davies era. I liked the design of it. What I liked about the actual space is it felt like you were in like a diving bell or something. It felt like that, squatting in a ship kind of thing. It wasn't some like high sci-fi thing where it's like, built to be lived in and all that kind of thing. It was just a vehicle like it'd like gone in a tank or something. It's all metal and bare bones and all that kind of thing. So I kind of like that kind of feel to the design, the feel that you're in, like you said, this utilitarian thing that he's squatting in. But it also felt a little bit too enclosed. I think it could be a bit expanded upon to play with the bigger on the inside, especially as they kept referencing corridors, but you never saw the corridors. And the thing with the Capaldi or Matt Smith Capaldi era one is that you see these doors, but you never really saw beyond them. So it was just like these doors on there. I know they had one episode where you saw the corridors and that, but in general, it's like you just saw doors. It didn't actually make it feel bigger. It just, there's a door there. So I was thinking about it, and if you imagine so if that's like the shape of the inside of the console room, so going around that, so it's shaped like that. So as you go around the wall, imagine the wall doesn't meet and it goes like that. So as you're like down here inside where the central console is, if you come up and down the tunnel, so people can walk offset down the tunnel, but you never actually see the camera pointing down the tunnel. You've just seen the opening to it. But it's not a doorway. It's this where the walls don't meet. So you can see it goes off somewhere. You see it disappears off, but it's always tantalizingly just around the corner. So you never quite see fully what's down there kind of thing. So that was the thing I was thinking of. But I do like the when they came back to that one that Capaldi was in, obviously started with Matt Smith. When they did that, they went back to it being more lit by the actual console and the time rotor as well. So it's again Chris Eccleston era, and then in that David Tennant's first era, they were doing a lot of that being lit by the actual time rotor, and the lighting's beautiful in those first couple of series. And then they just went to no, let's just light everything, and it's like suddenly you lost the atmosphere of the TARDIS. So they did sort of bring that back when they introduced that particular TARDIS with the Matt Smith, when they got rid of the whimsical one and brought back the sci-fi one. That they brought that back with it as well. They brought the lighting into it, and that's something that's really key. And it's also something that with like the current one, it's like when they get the lighting wrong, it looks like cheap plastic instead of crystals. But there's a few episodes when they get the lighting really good. They get the lighting really good. Yeah, I'm using English really well there. But no, when they do actually get the lighting right and they do well, it does look like crystals and it looks amazing. It's like, that's what they were going for. That's what the design was supposed to be. But unfortunately, a lot of the time they get the lighting completely wrong and it just looks like plastic things. So that's something to think about. But for me, yeah. Sorry.
I mean, sorry. I mean, yeah, I tend to agree. I mean, I'm not a fan too much of the mood lighting, but, you know, having it basically feel like it's a space being lit by the lights that are in it and not a big fucking spotlight that somebody's put, definitely. You know, I'd definitely go for that. I think as well, like, not to the extent that they did it on Eccleston's TARDIS, because, you know, Eccleston's TARDIS was a bit too far in that direction. But I quite like the idea of, you know, he doesn't take it to the shop for repairs, you know? So this panel that used to have switches that are just Gallifreyan switches, now actually he's had to put in some switches that aren't Gallifreyan switches. I'd like a bit of that. Not to the extent of having snow globes and bicycle pumps and shit, but, you know, maybe to the extent of, you know, here's a lever that's very clearly a Gallifrey lever. Here's a lever that's very clearly not a Gallifrey lever. Or, you know, here's a row of like really nice sci-fi switches, and underneath that sort of bolted in is a rather ugly metal plate covered in more, you know, like switches from somewhere else. And diversifying it a bit, you know. So here's a touchscreen panel, all right, which has alien writing that's very clearly not Gallifreyan, because that's a touchscreen panel he used to replace whatever interface was there from an alien planet 1,000 years in the future or whatever. Stuff like that, for example. You know, like go further. Like if it's a tattered old submarine he's squatting in, how about, you know, having bits of panel constantly off, or bits of spare panel? There's a spare bit of wall panel leaning against this wall with a roundel on it that, you know, used to be a bit of wall panel, and then he took it off and he replaced it with a different bit, but he hasn't actually got around to moving it yet. You know? I mean, I should probably point out, we've been the Doctor, and we are very, you know, we're old Doctor Who fans, so we're using the pronoun he a lot to describe the Doctor. Obviously, I think you and I can both take it as read that we can cast pretty much anyone as the Doctor at this point.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I mean, in an ideal world, I'd actually quite like to cast Alexander Siddig as the Doctor. I've always thought he would be amazing. You know, like now he would be amazing. Not 20 years ago when he was in DS9, he was too young then. But right now, maybe he's a tiny bit tall, but right now he's a lot better suited to it. I think he would be really good at it. I also, like, on a really basic level, I think I agree with Stephen Moffat that Doctor Who works at its best when there's two companions who can sort of play off each other and be like, Doctor's a bit weird, isn't he? And then the Doctor's like, you talking about me? And they're like, no, we're not talking about you, honest. We're not talking about how weird you are and how stupid that goat is. Oh, good. You know, stuff like that. Where there's, you know, repartee, essentially. People can play off each other to talk about the Doctor.
So in, like, going from New Who, from, like, you know, Rose up to present day, whenever it has just been the Doctor and companion, it's always ended up being the companion fancies the Doctor kind of thing. You know, so when it's like, you know, the Ponds, when they were on, it was the Ponds and the Doctor. I mean, obviously you had a bit of the companion fancying the Doctor in the first series, but, you know, she grew up and realised how stupid she was by, you know, following that when she's got, you know, the love of her life back home kind of thing. So yeah, no, I agree with that. That's something I'd like for the companions. But what era would you like the companions from, though? Because there is a thing of, okay, having them from this era, so then that's keeping it for the modern audience to view. But for me, when Jenna Coleman was first introduced, there was a picture of her, and she was wearing this jumper, and the jumper looked like it could have been from like the war era kind of thing. It's like that kind of like really old fashioned kind of jumper. There was some speculation that, oh, is that actually from the, you know, from her character's point, you know, is that the costume she's wearing, or is that just something she's wearing? And it turned out to just be something she was wearing. But the speculation of, oh, if that's actually her character, she could be like, you know, from the Second World War or something. And, you know, would that be interesting, having someone from this previous era? And then, of course, when she was introduced, she was introduced, like, you know, 3 times before she, you know, finally settled. And the Victorian Clara was actually kind of a cool version of the Clara as well. So, so what era for you would be ideal?
Honestly, I'd be kind of interested to have a character from like the late 80s, early 90s. Because I've been writing one, I keep saying, I've been writing one for a fan film who's a character from like that period. And I've had to like go, okay, I've looked up the slang, I've put in a few bits of what they would have been saying back then, I suppose, you know? And like the pop culture references are like from that era and stuff. It's close enough to our time that it's sort of relatable, and it's close enough to our time. It's close enough to a time where technology exists that they can be like, oh wow, this makes sense. It's a bit like this thing, you know. Oh wow, that's a cell phone. It's not a brick. That would be interesting. I think realistically, for like the BBC to not get on our backs about it, you'd have to have one companion from the now. But this is another reason to have like 2 companions, because it's like, all right, here's your safe, boring girl from London, who's like every other fucking girl from London and is a fucking RADA graduate, knowing my luck. All right.
And here's
now here's yeah. No, and here's the interesting one. Here's the one that's a bit more like, you know.
Here's this young kid called Marty McFly. He knows a little bit about time travel.
But, you know, stuff like, you know, let's have more Back to the Future references, but like from somebody who's like, you know, or somebody who's like, you know, oh yeah, I want to go see the Star Wars prequels. You really don't, though. Oh, but I do. You really don't, though. You really don't. Oh, what happens to Han Solo? Is there a sequel trilogy? Do they finally make it? Yeah, you probably don't want to see that either. Stuff like that, you know. Let's have fun with that and have it be like, I feel like the 80s is a bit underserved by modern Who to a certain extent. Let's have 80s, 90s stuff come in. Let's have a character from that era, you know, brought forward and have them be actually from that era instead of just a modern person, you know, if that makes sense. And for the love of God, can we not just kill, like, can we have them just leave? Like, I kill off companions quite often. I like killing off companions because there's a lot you can wring out of it. But realistically, in the show, it's overdone. Let's just have them leave. Albeit, let's just have them leave well. I like Martha's leaving, for example, where she decided to leave because she was done and she had things that she needed to do. You know? I wasn't necessarily so sold on the departure of like Ryan and Graham, but, you know, stuff like that where the companions just go and there isn't some like big cosmic horror-y thing that separates them, because it's like people have to move on with their lives. And almost as well, like another thing I'd quite like is if you're going for this thing of time is in flux, time is unpredictable, like what would be interesting is actually here's a companion who maybe didn't choose to live this life and is sort of living this life because the Doctor's finding it difficult to navigate. Let's bring a bit of that uncertainty in. Let's have a character who's not there because, oh, isn't being an adult with responsibility so shit? Let's go off with a magic spaceman and have adventures. Like, no. Like, excuse me, why the fuck am I in a time machine? I want to go home. Cool. Well, if I can figure out which button does that, I'll let you know. Stuff like that, for example.
Yeah. So basically, let's recap what we've got then. So it's going to be episodic, standalone episodes, but there's going to be some two-parters so we can have the cliffhangers. So what else we said? So for me, the time vortex is this thing you pass through between time eras. It's not somewhere you hang around. It's not an actual space. The TARDIS is a thing that moves from one era to another. It's not a little car that you get in and drive around. Once it's there, that's it. You're there for the duration. So there's your big idea about the time is in flux and so on and so forth, which I think is fine as long as it's not too blatant.
It's done well.
Otherwise, we're doing sliders rather than Doctor Who. You know, it's a completely different beast then. But yeah. So that can be an ongoing thing, which then gets builds up to a head in the finale, which also means you don't have like an ongoing story that, you know, for this time travel, can travel anywhere in time and space, yet still has this recurring character. How does that work, you know? It's, so yeah, having that like the big recurring storyline of times in flux, need to figure this out. So then we'd have like two companions. I agree, yeah, one from the present day, because you need to have one for the present day, but also one, I think the 80s is probably far enough back for it to stay sort of relevant as well. So I'd keep with that, and the TARDIS being
a submarine being squatted in.
Yeah. So exactly how that gets interpreted, obviously, will be down to the set director on the day. But yeah, I like the idea that it sort of started off like an old style TARDIS, and it's then like been repaired over the years and all that kind of thing. So that's all pretty cool. I'm just trying to think. I feel like there's something really obvious that we're missing.
I mean, the big thing I think we've not covered yet is old monsters and characters like the Master, the Cybermen, the Daleks, and to that I would say, assuming that you have more than one Doctor in our stewardship of the producer role, I always liked it in the 80s where every Doctor got their one big Dalek story and their one big Cybermen story and their one Master story. Or in the case of, you know, the Master, he kept fucking popping up. I like the Master popping up because it makes sense that a time traveler would pop up almost as much as the Doctor does. And I like that. So I quite like the idea of having the Master popping up more than once.
Possibly, but it's also that thing of, realistically, space is fucking huge. When you throw in all of time as well, that's like an infinite, you know, space in the 4 dimensions. So to then like keep popping in, you know, bumping into this other time traveler as well, it's like the odds of actually, you know, just bumping into each other So you'd have to have like, the Master would have to like have a reason to be like, oh, I'm going to love fucking with the Doctor this time. Wait till, stumbles upon this plan. You'd have to like set it up for the Doctor. It's just stumbling upon each other. I mean, for the sake of TV, it's like you can't go into it too much, but you can't. For me, I wouldn't want it to just be like every so often popping up and like literally just popping up. It has to be the Master's like setting up. Here's a reason. Like, I'm going to get that fucking Doctor.
But yeah, I mean, like one Dalek story, one Cyberman story, maybe Sontarans, maybe Ice Warriors, if you can think of a good reason for it. But like in general, like just the one. You don't need a million, And new monsters. It's not difficult to say new monsters. It's difficult to do new monsters. But I think
what I liked about the Moffat era, actually, it's not just Stephen Moffat. Actually, it's been done a lot in New Who. It's like taking something that's familiar and turning it creepy. Like the Weeping Angels is just, Art statue's creepy. Imagine if they came alive and got you kind of thing. It's that kind of thing, like especially for like younger kids, they then see that kind of thing. It's like, oh, that's quite freaky. I mean, like Kablam was like, kind of trying to do that with a popping, wrapping paper, I suppose, as well. But yeah, I kind of like that kind of thing of like, what have we got around us that we can turn into a monster? What have we got that we can make a threat out of? Like, oh, candlesticks. Oh, referring to them.
Oh no, handmade rockets hats.
Yes. Oh, the real horror is what's underneath.
Yeah.
So for me, that's what's more scary. Sort of implying that this ordinary thing is actually something really sinister. It's like, but at the same time, you then also need to have like, the more like, pure sci-fi stories and more just general horror. As I said right at the very beginning, it's like having it like a classic horror story, but then it turns out to be something sci-fi instead of it just being a supernatural. It's a ghost, but obviously it's not really a ghost because, that'd be supernatural, not science fiction, So it's like that kind of thing of playing with the genres in that sense. So it looks like it's going to be this supernatural thing, but it turns out to be this alien thing or whatever. This, rupture in time or whatever. But it's a sci-fi thing rather than a supernatural thing. And if you can make it a mundane, everyday object, then that's even better. Especially as we're obviously grown-ups talking about it and grown-ups who love watching it, but obviously the younger kids are a massive part of the audience as well, and it needs to be geared towards them. So let's scare the little fuckers. That's what I say. Back to the, watching from behind the sofa.
Damn straight. But yeah, I think to be fair though, I think we've pretty much covered everything that we need to think about.
I think they're the key points.
As
we always say though, we always invite people to join the conversation. Leave your thoughts in the comments below.
And if you think my idea was stupid, I don't care. I'm probably going to do it anyway one day. So, but feel free to say it. You've got the right to say it. And if you also want to tell me how stupid I am on Twitter, I am at Jed was here.
And I'm at AKTreasure1. But no, don't call him stupid on Twitter. Call him stupid in real life.
Yeah, because then I will punch you in the kisser where you belong. Yeah, I reserve the right to punch people in the face for calling me stupid. So anyway,
I think that's fair.
That's enough of that now. So thank you everybody so much for watching, and we shall see you next time. Live long and prosper and all that jazz.
Good night.
Diddly dum, 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 diddly dum. I mean, to be fair, if I was going to get really boring, I would just start talking about, there's actually like a scientific ratio of diddly dums, dum dum diddies, and dum da dums in the Doctor Who baseline, and where they have to actually happen, and how they actually have to happen, and the manner in which you actually arrange them. So you can have 3 of something in a row, but you cannot have 4 of something in a row. So like the regular baseline goes diddly dum, and diddly dum, dum dum, diddly dum, and diddly dum, dum dum, diddly dum da dum, dum da dum, dum da dum, dum dum diddy. You've got to make this the fucking ratio. You've got to do it right. And if you're not doing it right, you're not doing it right, if that makes sense. And this is the one thing that I prefer the Chibnall era for, because Murray Gold, for the life of him, never got the fucking diddly dums right. Okay? Ever.
Don't know. I'm sure there's one missing in the Chibnall era. There's one where it's like, that diddly dum, and then there's one just diddly diddly dum, and it's like, whoa, what happened to the dum? What the fuck? Except, with that, it's like the drum beat sound, but there's definitely.
I mean, it's weird because what you've got there's the drums, which are like, but then underneath that's the Derbyshire bass line, which is actually now the one thing that is missing is at the beginning you've got bass drop, and I'm not super fond of the bass drop. It is a bit yeah. Anyway,
I like it.
Anyway,
I actually like it.
Yeah, there are worse things. But anyway, plus side, me being boring and going on about the diddly dums might be a nice thing to put at the end credits.
Well, you've just said it. We can stick that on.